1 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started so I can give you your afternoon back. Welcome back to our small dairy herd management series. If you've been here before, you know this is kind of a ground level up series for all of the folks interested in getting into a small dairy herd. If you're already managing a small herd or you just want to know more, I'm glad you're here. So this is our 7th session. Our 8th one and final one is next month, and this one will be all about milking your cow. We're going to go through a couple different topics, which I will outline for you in just a second. Okay. So if you've missed some of our prior sessions, I have had a whole number of folks that have been on my team helping me out, talking about their different subject matter areas within the dairy industry. So this is our team. We have some of my colleagues from the university, as well as a colleague in NC State, and then a commercial lender from Central Bank. So super thankful for all these great people. Our goal of the entire webinar series is basically to just provide an introduction to the dairy industry, its parts, its pieces, mostly in Missouri, but a lot of this can span across the nation as well. We are also digging into how to best manage a small herd, whether it be like broken it down into sections, a step-by-step approach. However, that is easiest for us to kind of communicate and understand is our goal. And lastly, just to be informative, there's a lot of things out there about small dairy herd. A lot of it is not research backed or science based. So this webinar is taking information that is solely from university or research sources, breaking it down and kind of giving it to us at the bare minimum. So whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, hopefully you can find something of interest to you here. Okay, so quick housekeeping for us today. If you haven't been on Zoom before, welcome. If you have a question, you're going to use the chat box, which is going to be in the bottom bar on your screen. All you have to do is click on it, type your question, send it in, and I will be able to read it in real time. If you have some more questions that you think may need to have a follow-up conversation or we need to dig a little bit deeper, please feel free to email me. My email is actually at the bottom of this screen right now, and it will be at the end of the presentation. So if you don't grab it now, don't panic, it'll be up here again. Okay, and then this is me. Hi, my name is Chloe, if I haven't introduced myself yet. So I am a dairy field specialist in the Southwest region of Missouri, working for MU Extension. I've been in this role since July of 23, so coming up on a year and a half. And I am responsible for covering all of the Southwest region as well as across the state with one other colleague, Reagan Bull. So between the two of us, we cover Missouri. So my responsibilities range anywhere from kind of classroom programs, face-to-face programs, Zoom programs like what we're doing now, articles, farm visits, you name it. If it has to deal with dairy, I do it. So besides that, I also serve on some advisory boards. So we're thinking about like soil and water, our local fair boards, and other things throughout the region. My specific interest falls into the more reproductive and endocrinology phase of cattle. So if you have any repro specific questions, please reach out. Okay. So we will keep on rolling. Okay. So kind of the way I like to start these webinars is getting a feel from you guys about why you're here, what is your experience level, and then what kind of beginning questions you have. So this is a great time to utilize that chat box and go ahead and send something in. Our questions for today are, what's your experience with dairy farming and where are you looking to go with it? So kind of, what is your why? Why are you here? And then our next question is, what is your experience with or your current setup for milking if you currently have some dairy cows? So we'll hang out here a couple minutes. You're free to use that chat box, or if you want to talk to me, you can unmute yourself and just say what you have to say. Okay. And this chat session is going to be open throughout our entire webinar today. So if there's anything that you think of, you can go ahead and send it on through. Okay, that's awesome, Stacy. Are all four jerseys, or do you have a mix yet? All right, friends, we're going to keep on rolling. Again, that chat session is open if you need to share anything. But our topics that we're going to cover today, I've tried to break it down into somewhat easy to follow steps. So we're going to talk first about milk safety, then milk quality, our proper milking procedures, the timing of those procedures, and then finally we'll finish up with a little bit of hand milking tips and tricks. Okay. And you'll have to bear with me today. Usually I have a friend who is here to advance our slides for us and kind of mitigate our chat questions, but it is just me today. So if I'm a little bit slow, I apologize. All right, let's jump right in. So milk safety is a huge topic, and it's always going to be a prevalent topic whenever we're talking about any kind of fluid milk, raw milk, you name it. It's always going to be a concern because this is going into a food consumption chain, whether it's being fed back to calves, whether it's being given to humans. Somehow, some way, there's always something down the line that's going to receive our fluid milk products. Okay. So my title for this slide is Milk Safety. It's a big deal because it definitely is. If milk isn't safe, it isn't quality milk. That one is kind of self-explanatory. And another way to say that is it's more than just the milk itself. If you don't have a clean environment, if your milking equipment isn't clean, you're just going to have a whole host of problems before you can even get a foot in the door. And then besides just your equipment and your facilities, make sure those cattle are healthy. If those ladies aren't healthy, they're not going to be able to produce a lot of milk or up to their full potential. And then sometimes they can have issues with the milk depending on like what type of sickness they have or if they've eaten something weird. Okay. So what makes milk unsafe? So this is kind of topic of the day. And this could be an entire presentation in itself, but we'll keep it simple just for our purposes today. So mainly there are so many different bacteria that can be found in unpasteurized milk. A couple examples of those would be E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, Campylobacteriosis, Brucella, and all of these in humans will cause stomach cramping, vomiting, flu-like symptoms, and then those could actually potentially lead to other complications. So if we think of our youngins, so like our children, or if we think of the elderly, that is where a lot of these become really dangerous really quick. So just keep in mind you don't know where your milk is going to end up essentially. So having control over what you can and making sure all of your equipment is clean is kind of a zero thought process. So jumping right into that, how can you guarantee that your milk is safe? So the simplest answer is pasteurization. And I know a lot of people have been on that raw milk train, which if that is what you want to do, that is fine. But I'm always going to be here to provide the cautionary tale of you can't guarantee the safety of that milk if there's still bacteria that is alive in it. So pasteurization is the only way to be 100% sure that that fluid milk product does not contain any kind of harmful bacteria. And the bacteria that we're worried about, they can't be seen with just the naked eye. So looking at it and being like, oh, it looks safe, that's probably not going to be the best practice. So if you are selling raw milk, I would caution you to do so and maybe tell those clients, hey, this is a risk. This is possible from drinking raw milk, you have exposure to bacteria, and just be upfront. But also, if I would encourage pasteurization. So, if you have any questions about that or want some good different handouts, please just let me know. You can email me, and I'll be able to provide you with plenty of resources. And if you ever come across the question of can you pasteurize at home, if a client asks you that you're selling milks to, absolutely. And it is so easy. So the only rule of thumbs that you need to be able to provide is milk needs to be heated to 145 degrees for 30 minutes, or you can heat it up to 165 degrees for 15 seconds. The one The two things I would caution you with that is always make sure you're stirring that milk so the heating is even top to bottom throughout, and then make sure you're using an accurate thermometer. So once you've heated that milk, all that bacteria is dead and not going to affect you anymore. Make sure that milk is completely cooled and then properly stored in a refrigerated location. So if we do pasteurize, but then we don't store it correctly, you're still you're not going to have that great milk quality anymore. So good segue right into our milk quality talk. So safety and quality are two different terms whenever we're talking about fluid milk. Milk quality is actually the fluid milk that the cow produces and how good is it, if you want to say. So how we figure out how good it is by doing a couple different tests. Most of these are done before that milk even leaves the farm. So if we think kind of more our commercial dairy herds, a tanker comes, it picks up the milk, but before that milk is even loaded out of a bulk tank onto that tanker truck, that milk hauler is going to do a test and it will determine whether they take that milk or whether it's dumped. So what are they looking for? Mainly bacteria and then any other cells that may be present in the milk. And again, if those numbers are too high, then they test out and that load of milk can be refused completely. And that means that producer does not get paid. So you can see some of these, they seem like simple topics, but they can be a make or break for a lot of people. Okay, so is everybody doing good so far? Do we have any different questions on safety versus quality? If you do, of course, just throw them in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, so kind of stepping our foot in the door real quick, what makes quality milk? So the easiest way to have quality milk is to have healthy cows. Other things besides just the cattle that can affect the quality is different breeds. So if we think about our different milk components, which we'll talk about in a bit, breed can vary that. Overall health, the environment that they're in, how you manage your cattle, and then of course their diet can also play a big role in milk quality. So if I had to break it down into simple terms, I would say safety can eventually affect humans. Quality is just going to be how you're graded on your milk. So whenever we think about quality, whenever we think about quality testing, this is the big thing that I want you to remember is somatic cell count, or you may see it called like SCC score. So this is the most important quality test that tells a lot about the overall health of the cow and the quality of that milk. So what is SCC? It actually measures the number of somatic cells. So those are actually the white blood cells that are present in the milk. So why does that matter? So if we have a high number of somatic cells, that usually means that there is a health problem within the herd. And if your cows are unhealthy, they're not going to produce a lot of milk. Therefore, you're not going to get paid for as much milk. And then you still have sick cows to treat. So the problem with this, white blood cells are not going to impact the safety of your milk because it's going to get pasteurized. Remember, we're killing all the bacteria. But it means that somewhere in there is a cow that's not doing too great. So we need to take care of her. So besides SCC, we also have SPC. So easy to get confused, but I promise they're totally different. Our SPC is our standard plate count. Again, this one is super critical to the quality, but also the safety of the milk. So this one is where a lot of loads will get dumped or refused if that SPC is too high. So what is it? So SPC actually measures the total number of aerobic bacteria present in the milk, and this is all pre-pasteurization. So the milk that is sitting in the bulk tank that just came out of the cow and is just being held, of course, has not been pasteurized. So this measurement is an insight to the overall cleanliness in relation to your milking procedures, milking equipment, cow hygiene, and of course, back again to herd health. So a high SPC is anything over 10,000 and then CFU per mil. So CFU per mil is colony forming units. And then if you're following your best safety practices, it's not uncommon to see less than 5,000 colony forming units. Okay, we got a good question here. So are cows with higher SCC milk good to drink as long as it is pasteurized? This is the same as mastitis milk for consumption if unknown. So yes, where we see SCC linked to most of the time is that mastitis. Because if we have an infection in the udder, those white blood cells are going to be right there, and they're probably going to be pumping a number of them out. So if you have a higher SCC milk, if it's not mastitis yet, that would be safe to drink as long as it's pasteurized. But when you get into that mastitis milk, we're thinking kind of those clinical signs of that chunky milk definitely is a no. I would get rid of that. But if we go back to our SCC, sorry, y'all. Okay, I have this. Remind me when we talk about the grade A limits for our SCC and SPC, we can talk more about them then. Yeah. Always, yes. If in doubt, do not consume. If it looks suspicious, you probably should not put it in your body. Okay. So SPC, anything over 10,000 is high, under 5,000, wonderful. You're probably doing everything right. So to clarify some more on that colony forming units, it's not as scary as what it seems. So a colony forming unit is just a singular cell, so just one little cell that is capable of reproducing or being viable enough to divide and form a colony. It's not actually like an active group of cells. So a lot of that can be scary if it's in the bad context. So I always want to just break it down super simple. That way we don't have any misunderstanding. Okay, here we go. Perfect. This is the slide I needed. So whenever we're talking about high SCC, that's anything over 750,000 cells per mil. So say we had like a 500,000 SCC, I would consider that safe to consume. Anything below that, of course, is going to be even better. But for your grade A requirements for this to go into the food chain is grade A fluid milk. It cannot surpass these levels. So say you tested at 751,000 cells per mil for your SCC. It would not be unsafe technically, but it's just going to be refused. So if you say you have the beginning of mastitis and you're seeing that when you're stripping that T out, but your SCC is not testing high yet, that's kind of one of those common sense calls of if it looks suspicious, probably go ahead and treat that cow. And then for our SPC, so remember our standard plate count, so our bacteria, this level is a lot lower on what they'll take, which makes sense. So again, all of these numbers are going to be that pre-pasteurization requirements. So this milk has not been touched yet. So once any present bacteria that are there, even if it is under that level, they're all going to be inactivated essentially during pasteurization. Yeah, great questions, y'all. Will one cow make that count higher, or is this based off one? So this is based on an entire bulk tank test. One cow can maybe, depending on how sick she is, can skew it. But if you're just if you have a high bulk tank level that is up in that like 600,000, you probably have a couple ladies in there that are having an issue. But say you went from like a 200,000 to a 250, you may just have like one or two. So all of this is very circumstantial. My favorite answer is it depends. But if you see like a huge spike in your SCC from day 1 to day 2, usually a couple ladies are having some issues. Yeah. Okay, so back into our other quality measures. So this is I like to talk about components here. But one thing to remember in general is good quality milk should be low bacteria count, no odor, no off flavor, and be free of debris. So if you are selling milk off your farm, this is a good general statement to follow along with doing your test. So again, milk will be rejected by those haulers if they find any sort of antibiotic residue, if it's been altered. So sometimes they have issues with people adding water to their milk just to get that weight up. So they get paid on 100 pounds. So if you're adding water, they can test and they will know immediately if you have done so. Adding any sort of preservatives, that will show up as well. So the milk that you're getting through our commercial sources, it is very stringent and goes through a lot of different testing before it's even put into our food chain. So I would advise, if you're selling milk to your clients, just take the high road and take these extra measures as well. It's always worth bragging on yourself to say that I have great quality milk, I have very safe milk, instead of just doing the bare minimum. But that is just my recommendation. You most certainly can do your own thing as far as your marketing, but at least provide that safe milk to your clients. And then finishing up those higher compositional or component factors, and this is a lot of breed dependent too. We have our milk fats, milk solids, and proteins. So back to our friend who has Jerseys that she told us about, they usually have those higher milk fats, which is great for making butter. So a lot of co-ops will reward on that or pay you a little bit more premium for having some of those higher components. Okay. We have survived the milk quality and safety talk. So a few more things to go, but is everybody kind of doing okay so far? Any burning questions? Otherwise, we will just keep trucking. All right. Okay, so milking procedures. So let's see. So the one thing I always like to open it up with we'll stop and get this question real quick. So with testing for SCC and SPC done in-house, so an SCC is going to be done on, both of these are going to be done on the bulk tank. SPC, they can, if it flags something, they can go deeper into that using a lab test. So a standard plate count, they'll actually use like a plate that goes in an incubator and it will grow those bacteria on it. So it depends on how deep and how specific you want to do those testing. But you can do those at home as well. They make little kits. I'll have to find the link for those and send it to you because I did not come prepared with that. Sorry, y'all. Okay, good question. So, all right. So proper milking procedures, my kind of opening statement always is not everybody is going to do this the exact same way, meaning like their place, meaning their equipment, meaning their same intentions for that final product. And that's okay. You don't have to be doing the same thing your neighbor does. However, we should all be in agreement that these proper procedures, who are developed, research-based, tested, are very important because it is for the betterment of that cow, for our product, and then for our industry, and just general safety of you as well as your cattle. So no matter what type of facilities or equipment you're using, these procedures are going to be able to be followed no matter what. Okay, so another thing that is somewhat overlooked sometimes is when those cows are coming in to be milked. Most of the time, these ladies, they know, they're like, okay, my alarm clock's going off, it's time to be milked, and they may be just waiting on you. But if you have a weird scenario when you have to go and gather them up, bring them in, do it as least stressful as you can. So don't go out there hollering, yelling at them. Don't try to run them up with a four-wheeler. If you can just walk them in nice and quiet, it's going to help your milk let down a whole lot. So if you are stressing them, it may take them a little bit longer. They may be standing up there for longer before they can calm themselves down enough to let that milk let down effect happen. Okay, so these are the basic procedures kind of summed up for us to go through. Again, if you have any questions or want me to expand on anything, just let me know. Okay, so we have our cows up, they're in the parlor, they're ready to go, or wherever you're going to be milking them at. The first thing is kind of like that prep work before we get started. So pre-dipping our teats is going to be the first step in milking. So if we take a look at this picture on the right, you can see that our pre-dip is normally some sort of soap solution, cleaning solution, as well as either dipping, you can spray it on, but usually that pre-dip means some sort of dipping format. And then another thing that comes into our pre-dip step is any kind of manipulation or stimulation of that teat. So why that's important is that stimulation has to occur to make that cycle from brain to udder start working. So if she's not getting that stimulation on the mammary side, it's not going to signal back to her brain, okay, it's time to let down our milk. And then more on the cleanliness side, make sure that that pre-dip stays in contact for 30 seconds per teat and they're at least 3/4 of the way covered. So that's just eliminating that bacteria on the outside and good clean practices. Okay, so pre-dip, pretty simple, nothing too crazy. And then up next, once you pre-dip, once that sits, we're ready to go back and start stripping and drying our teats. So stripping our teats is wherever we take that pre-dip off, it's either wiped off or just with a gloved hand, and that fore milk is stripped. So why is that important? So all of the milk that's in the teat canal or right there close to it is going to have had the most contact with bacteria from the outside trying to make its way in. So getting rid of that immediately is one, going to help your SCC counts go down, and then prevent any bacteria from entering in or getting out. So we can see this person in this picture here, they're going to just pull down on the teat. I like that they're using a paper towel to contain that milk. So if we have some high SCCs, we're not going to have any cross-contamination. You can also strip into a cup and collect it that way. And then once you have stripped those teats, you can dry them off. A lot of people, they will actually look for any signs of mastitis here. So if you take those first 1 or 2 strips of milk out and they do look kind of chunky, that's when you can say, I think something's going on. Let's either one, call a vet and make sure nothing's going on with her behind the scenes. Okay, so stripping and drying teats, of course, this goes back into that stimulation factor as well. But once we are dry, we are ready to attach our milking unit. So it's important to get this unit on right after those teats are dried off, so we're preventing any kind of contamination happening to those nice clean teats. And the time that the milking unit is attached to whenever she's just about completely milked out is usually 4.5 to 5 minutes long. Of course, if you have those ladies with more capacious udders, they may take a little bit longer to fully milk out. If you have some of our first calf heifers with a very small udder, that time may be reduced as well. The one thing I will caution on is leaving these units on too long, which can happen. So what happens when you leave a unit on too long? It can cause some rough spots on the end of the teats. Sometimes that scar tissue will kind of scab over the teat canal, or just bleeding, cracked, dry tissue. Another thing that is always good is to just have your equipment vacuum tested. That way you're not putting too much pressure pulling out those teats when we're milking, or if there's not enough pressure, she's not going to milk out completely. Okay. How long is too long? So I would say whenever, so again, that time is estimated at 4.5 to 5 minutes. But of course, if we have a bigger uddered cow, it's going to be a little bit longer. But once you can feel that that udder is not full and you're not getting as much milk volume out, if you can see that in your system, then I would say you're done. Okay, do we need to base it off of watching Milkline if visible? You can, and if you're the same person that's milking that cow day in and day out, you're going to have a good idea of what is her normal production level. So once you kind of get to that level, if you're visibly seeing it, it can be a good idea to just, we're done. Yep, of course. And that's also a way to know, like, if that milk level is not as high as what she's normally doing, you can investigate that. Maybe she just hasn't ate a ton that day. Maybe it could be the start of a sickness. So just kind of being, I don't want to say in tune with your cattle, but just pick up on the little things can save you a little bit in the long run. So back to our pressure, just get your vacuum pressure checked, your idea pressure per claw. So per 4-unit thing is 10.5 to 12.5 pressure. And I do not know who will do that locally. I want to say your equipment manufacturers. I'm not sure if Mueller will do that, but I will look into where can we get vacuum pressure tested. Okay, so milking, amazing. And then once we're done milking, this is arguably one of like the most important steps is our post-dip. So if we take a look at the picture on the right here, this is just a different type of post-dip. This one is green. Most of them are usually iodine, so kind of that reddish brown orange looking liquid. But why this is so important is that teat end is still going to be open after milking, meaning it's basically a bacteria channel straight up into the udder. Those teat canals take about 30 minutes to close after milking, so just providing this physical barrier on the teat can really help. Another thing that we can do to even help that along even more is keep them standing up for that 30 minutes after milking. So whether it's they leave the parlor wherever you're milking and they're going straight to eating, that's a great way to keep them up. Or if you don't have a lot of cows that you're milking and you're able to just hold them, that's another option as well. But just a little precaution that 30 minutes after milking that teat canal, it's going to be staying open. So so we know our procedures, we know the steps, we know the order, we know how it all works. Let's throw in a little time factor. So timing is huge, and it mostly has to do with that communication with the brain and all the other body systems. But this is kind of an easy way to break it down. So this nice pretty arrow is from udder preparation to milking unit attachment in seconds. So this is a pretty quick process. If you're not getting this down to the second, the first however many times you're milking, it's not going to be detrimental, but this is just kind of the idea goal. So we're going to start on the left-hand side and work our way through. So from our pre-dip, so remember that soap-based cleaner to our forestrip or our stripping of our teats should be 0 to 15 seconds. So again, I may disagree with that one because I like that pre-dip on for 30 seconds just to get the maximum cleaning. So, sorry. So once we have stripped, we're going to let that just sit before we dry our teats off. So this one is going to be 15 to 60 seconds, so about that 45-second allotment, just to let that milk letdown communication occur. Then we're going to dry off our teats, and then we're going to move to the green section and attach our milking unit. So this should be happening about anywhere 30 seconds after that teat has been dried, that milking unit needs to be on. And then if you are just running a little bit behind, kind of fumbling, dropping stuff, it's okay. It kind of gives you a 1 minute maximum time from teat being dried to milking unit being on. So if you're doing it in 30 to 60 seconds, you are doing amazing. And then late milking unit attachment is this red over here. So why don't we want late milking unit attachment? Remember when I talked about bacteria getting to that nice clean teat? We're going to avoid that if at all possible. So nothing amazingly detrimental. Your cow's not going to fall over if you don't get your milking unit on in time, but we're just in the best interest of preventing any bacteria. Okay, so does that timeline kind of make sense? The steps in the timeline, we're doing good. All right. So why are we worried about timing? So we, as producers, we cannot control that communication that's happening in her brain to let that milk down. But what we can control is mitigating those negative impacts on that process. So anything that may slow down that brain to udder communication. So again, back to our low stress environment being super important. You don't want to be yelling at people while you're milking your cows. Just play them some nice soft music and you're good to go. But another thing about timing that's important, remember our teat canal getting closed up, preventing that bacteria from getting in, takes 30 minutes. And a fun fact, an estimated 50% of all new mastitis cases are contracted in that 30 minutes after milking. So just some food for thought. If there's any way that you can keep those ladies standing up after that post-dip is applied, try to do it. Okay, and then the question sometimes comes up on how often should I milk? So the absolute minimum, go ahead and milk twice a day, every 12 hours. Some people, they milk 3 times today or every 8 hours if their labor is not an issue. But if you're working your job in town, milk before you leave and then milk when you come home, and usually those ladies will be fine. And then once a day milking is strongly discouraged, especially during that peak lactation. A lot of pressure is going to build up inside that udder if you're only milking her once a day. And it's not comfortable for her. It's not great for that milk being held in there for too long. So I just discourage it. If you can milk twice a day, you're doing great. And then in total, how long can you expect to be milking for? So her lactation starts as soon as she has that calf. And that lactation period is going to last about 9 to 10 months, and then leaving her a 60-day dry period, which is that tail end of her gestation. So plan on milking about 9 months. If you can, have her calve in like February, and then you can just milk until December. And then you'll have to milk in the snow, hopefully. Okay, so if you don't have equipment or an automatic milker, that is totally fine. Hand milking is still around and still a great option for some people, but there is a lot of cautionary tales that I will give you if you are resorting to hand milking. Okay. So our same exact procedures apply whether we are hand milking, whether we are using a machine or an automated milker. We should always follow those best cleanliness, best safety practices. So there is a greater chance actually of bacteria contraction with hand milking since it isn't a closed system. So when I say closed system, what I'm meaning is having that milking claw on. So those teats are covered. That milk is going straight into that claw and into your container that is closed as well. So the milk isn't exposed to bacteria in a closed system. But if we're just hand milking into a bucket, that leaves all sorts of opportunities for bacteria to come in contact with our milk. So not great, but there is definitely ways that we can be safe about it. So the first thing, go ahead and just wear gloves no matter what. And then I always like to recommend changing gloves between each cow. So say you're wearing gloves, you are stripping your first cow, and she may have a little bit of chunky milk come out. You should probably go ahead and change your gloves before you move into the next cow, just in case that first one has a little bit of mastitis. We don't want to be that vehicle for it. So last point, cleanliness is paramount, and I will preach this over and over again since that milk is kept in an open container. Okay, so just the basics of hand milking, if you've never done it before, I definitely think it is a skill, and some people just get it right off the bat. Some people, like me, struggled with it a little bit at first. So to begin, you start at the top of the teat closest to the bottom of that udder floor, and you kind of just make a ring around it with your thumb and your pointer finger. And then to actually start the milking process, you just kind of squeeze down, so from the top to the bottom. And then that rolling motion, once you squeeze, you're going to get milk, and then you just begin it all over again. So I love this picture because we're wearing gloves. It makes me so happy. Okay, so some more tips on when you're hand milking. So go ahead and stop whenever that udder feels empty. So it's going to be a lot more like pliable instead of very firm. And then no more milk is coming out the teats. For your hand milking, a good estimate of time is about 8 to 10 minutes, start to finish. And usually milking 2 teats at a time, so using both hands is the most efficient. However, if you're just new at it, just starting out, it is totally okay to just do 1 at a time until you're comfortable with it. So this time estimate is, again, per teat or per quarter or per half. Like if you're doing 2 teats at a time, it should take you 8 to 10 minutes to empty those quarters. Okay. Any questions on hand milking? All right, friends. Well, this one was kind of a quick webinar today, but I will leave you again with kind of our 3 takeaway points. Cleanliness is everything, from that cow to the equipment to you as the milker to your facilities, anything and everything in between. Mitigating that bacteria spread from the get-go is going to save you so much time and trouble in the long run, especially if you're selling this milk to clients. We want to be sure that we're providing them with the safest product possible. And I don't want you guys to be liable for anything that may happen if we have some sort of bacteria exposure. So again, cleanliness is paramount, tried and true. It's never a clean facility, a clean cow, clean you is never going to do you wrong. Okay, second point, always follow those standard milking procedures. So just our 4 steps, our pre-dip, our strip and dry, our actual milking, and then our post-dip. No matter how you're milking, following those procedures is going to help you every single time. And then lastly, I want to bring it up again just because I think it's important to, one, be aware of the risk and then mitigate those if necessary, is pasteurization is the most important step in guaranteeing safe milk. Right. Okay, here's a good question. Any comments on the use of the California mastitis test on the farm? So I actually have not performed those myself, so I can't really speak to their effectiveness or reliability. I'm always one to let the vet handle it, and they will actually take that milk, put it under a microscope where they can actually see different bacterias. So I have a little bit of a vet med background myself, so I'm always the fan of, if you can, look into things as much as possible. But no, I have not used any of the on-farm tests personally. Okay, so again, this is my information, how to get in contact with me, my email, as well as my office phone number. So if there's anything that we talked about that interests you, kind of like sparked an idea, conversation, please reach out. And if I'm not in the office, they have my permission to give you my cell phone so we can chat on the road. Okay, y'all. So our very last session is coming up December 2nd. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking with me this long. Our final session will be covering the next generation. So everything from calf care, calf sharing, anything from when that calf hits the ground to raising it up, we're going to cover. Okay. And then I do need to get our last 2 recorded sessions posted up to YouTube and get evaluations out. So once all that is done, I will be reaching out in an email. But until then, thank you for being here, and I will see you guys soon. Thank you.